Hello, everyone. I'm here with Helen Worrall, an occupational psychologist with most experience in psychological assessment at work in different areas also. And I'm here with her direct from Australia. So it's a nice and exciting thing for us. So welcome, Helen. It's an honor to be here with you, and good morning for you.
Thanks, Amanda, and good evening to you.
Thank you, Helen. What I want to know, and I know that you have different experiences in the area, right? But about psychological assessment, I want to ask you, how can you use psychological assessment to help matching people to suitable roles? What are the best measures that can help with this efficient matching process?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. So I think from my background, where I would usually start is I would look at things like cognitive ability, personality, and maybe also these days we might look at strengths. So there's a few different ways we can approach this. We can also look at how people fit with an organizational environment as well as just a role. So I think there's something around cognitive ability first. I think if you work in this space, you've got interest in this space, we know there is a lot of research, like 100 years of research, to show that cognitive ability is the strongest predictor of job performance, and the more complex the role, the stronger predictor it is. So kind of having that as the first basis, I always like, because it's a really powerful way to see if someone is going to be aligned to the demands, like the cognitive demands of a role. So I start there. And then we can also look at personality, which is rather than your ability to kind of deal with the cognitive demands of a job and like whether you can learn and adapt, deal with, complex decisions and, take on new information and skills and then apply them, which is what we learn in cognitive ability about someone. Personality is more about preference. So there will obviously be certain tasks that we enjoy more than others because of our personality. And obviously you'll be more motivated, more engaged, more satisfied if you're doing a role which is aligned with your preferences. And I always use this example of like a salesperson. If you had two candidates for a job in a sales role and they both have the same cognitive ability, both have the cognitive ability required for the role, but one of them is really social and outgoing and is really motivated by targets. And the other person is, more quiet, prefers to, collaborate with people rather than compete. You just think about who's going to make the most calls, who's going to make the most sales. So even though personality is about preference, it's still really powerful. And the other thing I think that started to come in more recently, which I haven't mentioned, but is important, is emotional intelligence. And for some roles, emotional intelligence will be particularly important, like leadership, like sales, like customer relationships, because that's all about your ability to perceive and understand and like manage your emotions, but also the emotions of other people, and really being able to pick up on those like social cues and then use them effectively, whether you're trying to motivate someone like in a leadership role, or if you're trying to persuade someone like in a sales role. So that can also be really important. And finally, I mentioned strengths, which is kind of a bit of a newer conceptualization of where we can think about fit, which is more coming from this new positive side. Well, I say new, been around for about 20 years, but from the positive psychology side, which is around like what energizes us in our role, what do we enjoy doing, but also what are we good at? So it's kind of combining these two aspects. And I think this is a really new and exciting area. And finally, I talked about fit not only to role, but also to environment. And I think this is also really powerful. There's a model called the theory of work adjustment, and they talk about factors that are common across all work environments. They have 20 factors. It could be things like supervisor support, for example, like technical supervisor support. So how much direction and support do you get from your manager in like the technical aspects of your role? And if that's really high in an organization, but it's not important to you, it's not going to be very motivating. Similarly, if that's really important to you, but your organization doesn't provide that, that's not going to be a good fit. So we can also look at like the factors that the work environment provides you with, and how they align with what you feel is important in your work environment. And we can see also that really aligns with things like engagement, satisfaction, and things like tenure. You know, if you're not in an organization that suits you, similar to if you're not in a role that suits you, you're not going to stay there. And people really start adding value in roles after about 2 years in role in terms of bottom line impact on the company. So it's actually really valuable to think about these things that are actually going to keep someone engaged in a role, keep someone in your organization, because they're going to really add value over time and be more likely to progress as well through the organization, be promoted, etc.
Oh my God, Ellen, amazing. A class here for me, because this is nice, because nowadays we talk a lot about organizational fit and how we need to see the individual considering his values, interesting, and we also have to see the context, the organization, and see how this individual could be matched in a role that, and all these factors that you said they are so important. Thank you for sharing, and really I learned it now with you. About the matching process also. Sorry, what happens if a poor match occurs? Like a poor match can totally impact the well-being of an employee, right? So what are the real consequences for these poor matches on employees?
Yeah, so I mean, for example, think about if you were in a role which really was more cognitively demanding than you could give. I imagine that would feel extremely stressful for you individually as an employee. I mean, certainly if I'm in a role where I feel like I'm not able to meet the requirements, I find like if I'm doing a task where I feel like I'm not able to meet the requirements, I feel really stressed. So it's not a pleasant experience for the employee. And what we find in terms of what happens in an organizational level, we find that in those situations, people are more likely to be, managed out of the business. So there's kind of turnover, but it's involuntary. The employee doesn't necessarily want to leave, but the organization eventually recognizes they are not, performing well in this role, and therefore we will have to manage them out of this role into another role or out of the business. And this is just not a good experience for anybody. If there's a poor match in terms of personality fit, so that preference of like the tasks you're having to do, and if they don't really suit you, that will lead to things like lower satisfaction and engagement with the role, and more likely to lead to voluntary turnover. So more likely that person will eventually say, this role just is not for me, I'm going to leave. And of course, neither of these things are good for the organization, because every time you have to recruit someone and replace someone, that is costing a lot of money. There's some estimates of like 30 to 150% of someone's salary if they don't work out, like when you have to recruit someone and then they leave. So yeah, it's really, really big impact on the organization, but also on the employee. Like that experience of having to then go and find another role, or really, really not enjoying your role and feeling dissatisfied and feeling disengaged, is just not a pleasant experience to be in. And we find a similar thing with strengths as well, and also with that organizational fit aspect. So if you're in a team or an organization where they are really providing you with parts of the workplace environment that are just not motivating to you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just like they're just not motivating to you. The problem is where there's some factor that's really important to you, like maybe you want lots of autonomy in your role, you want lots of creativity, you want to really collaborate with your colleagues, and those things aren't being provided for you. Then again, there's this lack of satisfaction, lack of engagement, and then that can also lead to turnover. Like that person is going to leave because they're just not being motivated by that environment. So they're I think they're kind of insidious, the preferences ones. So the one around organizational fit and personality fit to a role, they take longer, I think, for the outcomes to happen, like whether that's dissatisfaction from the employee and then leaving. Whereas with the cognitive ability side, I think that becomes clearer. If somebody can't deal with the demands of the role, that becomes clearer faster. But it doesn't necessarily get dealt with quicker because, you know, some organizations, they don't necessarily want to have these difficult conversations and ask how people are going when they can see someone is struggling. So yeah, they both lead to you know, similar kind of outcomes in the end, essentially that person leaving that role or that organization, but they happen in different ways, yeah, and over different periods of time usually too. Yeah,
for sure, it's not good for both parts, right? From the person who are gonna do that and for the person who are feeling that dismissed, for example. But in your talk, I get some things like in the perspective of the resource building theory, that you have to build resources and you have to get your situation out of your comfort zone for that. How can we have the deal point, you know, when the person's like is overwhelmed and is with conflict and can do the role at the job, and the point that this makes you grow, and this discomfort zone that are anxious and a little bit stressful are gonna make you handle more in another situation. So how can we defer these two things in an employee?
Yeah, oh, that's such an interesting question, Amanda. Yeah, so I think so if we think about cognitive ability first and then we think about personality. So with cognitive ability, you could have the underlying like cognitive ability to do the role. So you could have like the ability to like learn the new skills in the role. So you've never done the role before and you need to learn a load of new tasks, a load of new skills, lots of new knowledge. And, you know, this could be stressful and very demanding at the beginning, you know, when you start a new job and it's so exhausting because you have so much to learn. And that could be very, very tiring and it could feel stressful and a little bit like you need to prioritize your time. You need to learn these new skills. But if you have the underlying cognitive ability to actually complete the tasks and do them, then that's going to be not the same level of stress as somebody who just fundamentally doesn't have the ability to do the job or the tasks required in the job. So there's that kind of like, you could be pushed a little bit into feeling a little bit stressed because you're learning all these new things. But I think there's that subtle difference between feeling like I can't do this job and okay, I'm being pushed here. This is challenging, but it's not like completely overwhelming, completely like outside of my abilities. You know, they're two slightly different things. And similar with personality, you know, we know personality now is not fixed, you know, and there's research to show that your actual work environment can shift your personality over time. Your work tasks can shift your personality over time. But still, the amount of shift that's going to happen is not huge. So we're not going to be, you know, if we're very, very introverted person, we prefer to do solo tasks and we, you know, not particularly gregarious, don't really enjoy, you know, speaking to people all of the time. We're not suddenly going to go to the other end of the spectrum just because we have a role where we're forced to talk to, you know, multiple people. So think of that person in that sales role from the beginning. If you had that person who was very quiet, not very sociable, and they were forced into that kind of role where they had to like pick up the phone to people all day, every day, they are not suddenly going to become really sociable people. That's just probably just going to be so outside of their comfort zone that it's going to be really uncomfortable for them. But if you had someone that's maybe more in the middle of that introvert extrovert scale, and they could maybe, you know, they do that task, maybe they feel a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning, but the more and more they do it, the more comfortable they become with it. And they're able to shift themselves slightly more towards that kind of more sociable, more happy talking to people, you know, end of the scale. So there's going to be a small shift because they've been in doing these tasks, which are maybe slightly outside of their comfort zone for a number of months or years or something, then you would see this shift. But it's not going to be from one end of the scale to the other. So it's about the amount of, I guess, fit or misfit that you could have and what those parameters are with what makes it a good fit, to you, and whether you can shift into that.
Yeah, amazing. Always the dose, right? is the challenge that we have to find the right dose for it. It's nice. And to talk about that also has a link with emotional intelligence, right? Because when you have like emotional intelligence, you can also perform tasks in a better way or have better relationships in some points. And what I want to ask you is how can we develop emotional intelligence in our daily life? What is useful to assess emotional intelligence in the recruitment process when I'm recruiting people from the organization? How can it be done in a successful way?
Oh, this is a great question. Emotional intelligence is such an interesting area. And I think it's really, although the term has been around since the 90s, it's really, developed a lot in the recent past. Become a bit more of a buzzword. People hear this term and they kind of feel like they know what it means a bit more. But there's two different ways that you can assess or measure emotional intelligence. One of them is kind of trait-based, personality-based kind of measurement, and one is ability-based measurement. And for recruitment, I guess I feel a lot more comfortable with the ability-based measurement, because it's all about what are someone's underlying abilities in those different areas of emotional intelligence. So we talk about perceiving emotions. So that's, can you pick up on the emotions in yourself and other people? Can you recognize them, what they are? Mm-hmm. Understanding emotions, so being able to understand how emotions have arisen, like what events and situations have made that emotion arise, how can they change over time, and how can you impact that emotion? And also managing emotions. So I think this is the one that really people think about when they think about emotional intelligence. They think about regulating or managing emotions. And that's obviously how can you manage your own emotions and the emotions of other people. And also there are effective strategies for regulating emotions, and there are less effective strategies for regulating your emotions. So it's a really interesting area. And yeah, ability, I think it's better for recruitment, because it means that we can test someone's underlying abilities in all of these areas. We can then score them, and then we can compare them to other people in a fair way. So I think that this is the fairest way for using it for recruitment. But we can develop our emotional intelligence, and there's some great work out there, like by Mark Brackett, who uses his ruler framework, for example. I really like this. Which is, now let me get it right, recognize, understand, label, express appropriately, and regulate emotions. So it's the same kind of model of you perceive it, you understand it, and then you manage it. Mm-hmm. So I think in recruitment, it's really important to do that in an ability-based way, but we can develop our emotional intelligence as well, which is, I think, nice to know.
Yeah, amazing. And how psychological assessment at work also could help, not just emotional intelligence, like to know and to identify that in people, but also help personnel development.
Yeah, okay. So I think in terms of, like when we're doing our own personal development planning, say, or career development planning in the workplace, some really useful areas, I think, are definitely personality. There's so much that we can find out about our own preferences just from, a relatively short personality assessment. And I think what's great is that we can use this not only for our own individual reflection, and then planning, what's this role that's going to, what's the next role that's going to suit me? How might I craft my role actually to better suit my preferences? We can see from a personality assessment things that we're more likely to be, that we're more likely to enjoy, things that are likely to motivate us, things that are likely to stress us out. We can also look at things like our interaction style. And this helps us to assess and reflect on, what aspects of my role do I feel more resistant to? What aspects of my role do I enjoy doing? I just feel that I enjoy them, and other aspects that I just don't enjoy. And just having something on paper which really kind of explains your personality can really help you, I think, in that reflection of, oh yeah, that's why I'm not enjoying that particular aspect of my role. And then when you're thinking about development over time, you can then start to say, okay, well, how could I maybe bring in more things that I really enjoy, like that job crafting piece? What could I maybe give to someone else? What could I do more of? Because it's really aligned with my personality preferences, and therefore I'm really going to enjoy and be engaged by those tasks. And the other thing that's cool with personality assessment in a workplace, if you have a whole team do it, is that then you can actually map everybody on all of the traits, and you can see, how do I align with this person? Oh, I can see, I really get on with, with Amanda, because we're both really similar on this collaboration scale. We both really enjoy to collaborate with each other. We're really motivated by that. And so therefore we get on really well. But then maybe there's another colleague who you see, oh, they're really highly competitive. And so actually, that's not how I like to work. I prefer to be collaborative rather than competitive. And that's why maybe we are having these miscommunications a lot. Maybe that's why I don't understand where she's coming from on various, when we have various meetings, and I just don't understand the way she's approached what we're going to do, because she's coming at it more from this competitive angle than the collaborative angle. So actually doing those kinds of exercises in a team way as well can be really, really helpful, not just only for your own development and thinking about your own reflections and like how you can craft your own role, but also how can I interact more effectively with this person because their traits are like this and my traits are like that. And yeah, when we do team-based assessment, that can be really, really helpful. It really helps sometimes to for people to see, the light of like, okay, now I get it. Like why I have been having lots of conflict with this person, or why I've really been getting on with this person. And it's not that there's a problem with the person I've been having conflict with. It's actually, we just have this misalignment on these traits. And that's why we're not getting on so well. It's not like there's a problem over there. It's just, we have this misfit. There's no blame. There's no one problem. It's just, there's this misalignment. And we can also then help to think about how can we get around that better? Yeah. How can we work with that person better? And sometimes we just need another perspective on that. Because, when we've been the same way our whole lives, it's hard sometimes to see if someone's very opposite to you. It's sometimes just difficult to see how you could put yourself in their shoes. But if you have something on paper that says, try this, try this, try this, then it's just really beneficial for people oftentimes.
Yeah, and it's amazing because I think this is the problem of most of relationships. We can put ourselves in the perspective of others and think how they feel about the situation, that it's always different from us. It's always unique. And that example that you gave is so important, because this could help effective teamwork. And we know that in multicultural organizations, we need effective teamwork to work together to fit the jobs and to get the market going all right. So
yeah, definitely. Relationships, I always think that they grease the wheels. If you don't have good internal relationships, then it doesn't matter how great you might be, how much ability you have to do the role, how great you might be at the individual tasks. If you don't have good relationships with people in your team, or outside of your immediate team, but the people that you're really making the work happen with, if you don't have those good relationships, then you're not going to have effective outcomes. It's not going to be successful, or it's not going to be as successful as it could be. So yeah, it's really worth investing the time in those things to really have the best outcomes. Yeah, definitely.
And this is amazing because, Helen, it's not just in our daily work, right? It's in our lives too, because we're not on an island. We don't live alone. We live with other people. So relationship is a part of the process. And to finalize this amazing interview and knowledge sharing with you, I want to ask you that we know a lot concepts and theories of emotional experience, but I want to know, subjectively asking you, in your experience in the field and the background that you have, what is emotional intelligence to you?
Oh, wow. Okay. So the definition that we use
Not a definition.
Of course, we're scientists, right? We need the definition.
I'm kidding. You can say the definition.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, Ellen.
The intelligent use of emotions and emotional information, Mayer and Salovey. So yeah, I would say it's about, oh, this is interesting because I haven't really thought about trying to define it myself, but it's about being able to, I think the first piece is self-awareness. Personally, I do a lot of work. I find emotional intelligence really interesting, and I do a lot of personal work around developing the underlying skills to have, to try and develop my own emotional intelligence. And I think really the first one is around self-awareness. Like in order to do all of these aspects of emotional intelligence, the perceiving the emotion in yourself and others, the understanding the emotion, where does it come from, how does it change over time, and then how to effectively manage or regulate that emotion. The first thing we need is self-awareness. And so really that's being able to see how your thoughts impact your emotions, being able to recognize how your emotions may be connected with certain thoughts, how they may recur over and over and over again. You have these similar loops of thoughts that might replay in your mind over days, over weeks, over months, over years, the same stories, and how that can ignite emotions within yourself. And also how the emotions manifest in your body. And this is something that really I have really had to work on myself. It's not something that comes naturally to me, but really how do you feel the emotions in your body, and actually getting to understand the signals that your body is giving you about your emotions. So maybe anxiety comes up as like a tightness in your chest. Maybe, the sadness comes up as like a sinking feeling in your stomach, like whatever it is. Actually learning to recognize what are those physiological signals that my body is giving me, as well as what's going on in my mind. And that can also help us to label the emotions effectively, because we know that the more words we have to describe the nuance of emotion that we feel, the better we generally are at then managing and regulating our own emotions. So I really think it's about, self-awareness and developing self-awareness in lots of different ways, whether that's trying to recognize what's going on in your own body, trying to get more nuanced about how you describe your emotion. And there are like really cool apps out there. There's a great app called the Mood Meter, which is one of Mark Brackett's tools that they use to help people really develop their emotional vocabulary. Because these are really, I think, underpinning things. And then it's about recognizing that once you can feel an emotion, you should feel like you should give yourself permission to feel what you feel, to feel it, but then actually to express it appropriately and to manage it effectively is a different thing altogether. You can feel it without having to necessarily be reactive and express exactly how you feel in that moment. There might be another way, there might be a better way of doing that. When we think about managing our emotions, the more we have in our toolkit, the better, because we could use things like social support, like reaching out to a friend. We could use something physical, because this will change our mood, like either uplift us by getting the endorphins pumping and the adrenaline pumping if we're doing like a fast exercise, or can really help to lower our physiological response if we just go on a nice relaxing walk, or we do some yoga or something. And the more options we have in our toolkit, and the better that we will be, and the more chance we will have of effectively being able to cope in lots of different types of situations. So I think just trying to be aware of what are all the different things that we can do to manage our emotions in these different buckets, like physiological, social, and then there's also cognitive strategies, obviously, like reframing, doing mindfulness, trying to think about the situation from another perspective. There's many different things that we can do and that we can learn about. And I think it's just about trying to experiment with all these different ways, and see how they work for you, to just generally enhance your own emotional intelligence from all these different parts of that experience.
Oh, this is amazing, Helen. Not amazing. You also give us a tip of what's the name? Sorry, sometimes that you said of the application.
Oh, the app?
Yeah, the app. Sorry. Oh, the app. What is the name again? Just for the
the mood meter.
The mood meter. Okay,
Yeah,
Ellen.
mood meter app.
This wasn't amazing. This was incredible. This interview was incredible. I learned a lot from you. I'm sure that people also will learn a lot and reflect a lot. I having to listen again, and take notes and reflect. It was an amazing experience to me. Thank you so much for you be able to be here with me to chat and to share knowledge. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, it was great speaking with you. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your evening and good luck with your master's thesis.
Thank you.